Ever felt stuck? Like your mind is running on some seriously outdated software? Well, what you're about to hear is the blueprint for a full system upgrade. And look, we're not talking about little life hacks or small tweaks here. We're talking about re-engineering the entire system of your brain, because it's not fixed. And we're going to show you exactly how to do it.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We've broken it down into 5 acts. First, we got to diagnose the problem, what we're calling the brain's default prison. Then, we'll discover the master key that unlocks it all, neuroplasticity. After that, we'll dive into the specific chemistry of change, learn how to use the action control panel, and finally, pull it all together to architect a brand new identity.
All right, let's start right there with that feeling of being trapped. You know exactly what you should do, but for some reason you keep doing the exact opposite. Now, this isn't some failure of character. It's your brain's default setting. And honestly, it's a prison. A prison built for survival, sure, but definitely not for progress.
You know, Dr. Andrew Huberman framed this perfectly. When your brain is left on autopilot, it creates these loops. It finds the easiest path to a little dopamine hit, and then it just keeps taking that path, over and over, until it progressively narrows its focus so much that it's the only path it wants to take, locking out everything else that could bring you satisfaction or growth.
So why does it do this? Well, your brain is what's known as a cognitive miser. See, it uses a ton of energy, so its number one job is to be efficient. And what's the most efficient thing it can do? Run the old programs, even if those programs are making you miserable. And that efficiency, that's the very architecture of what it feels like to be stuck.
And this slide just perfectly captures the internal war so many of us are fighting. It's this idea of stated versus actual preferences. You say you want to be disciplined and focused. That's your stated preference. But your brain, it doesn't listen to what you say. It watches what you do. And when it sees you choosing the easy, high dopamine thing again and again, well, that becomes your actual preference. The system believes your actions, not your words.
So, if we're trapped inside our own hardware, how the heck do we get out? Well, that brings us to the master key, the fundamental scientific principle that makes this entire upgrade even possible: neuroplasticity.
And look, this isn't some fluffy self-help buzzword. No, this is hardcore neurobiology. Neuroplasticity is simply the brain's built-in capacity to rewire itself based on experience. Every new habit, every skill you learn, it's all happening because of this one mechanism. It's basically the software update that lets you completely rewrite your own hardware.
Okay, but here's the catch, and it's a big one. Up until about age 25, your brain is like wet clay. It's passively shaped by everything around it. That's why kids pick up languages so easily. Now, after you turn 25, that window doesn't slam shut. But man, it gets a lot harder to pry open. As an adult, change doesn't just happen to you. You have to literally force it to happen.
Right. So how do we actually do that? How do we force the brain to change? Well, it all comes down to mixing a very precise neurochemical cocktail. And you need to understand these ingredients because you're about to become the chemist of your own mind.
All right, first up in our cocktail, acetylcholine. The best way to think about this chemical is like a spotlight. When you bring intense, laser-like focus to something, acetylcholine floods the scene. It doesn't change anything by itself, but it shines a bright light on the exact neural circuits you're using and puts a chemical sticky note on them that says, hey, pay attention to this one. This circuit is up for renovation.
Okay, next ingredient. This is the engine, norepinephrine. This is what creates alertness, but it also creates that feeling of agitation, frustration, friction. Now, this is so important. Most of us feel that friction and we think it's a stop sign. We think it means turn back. But that is a complete misread. That friction is the trigger. It's the starting gun, not the red light.
And that brings us to our third ingredient, dopamine. Now, we all think of dopamine as the reward at the finish line, right? But that's not its most important job here. Think of it as the fuel, the rocket fuel that helps you power through the hard part. When you're in that agitated, focused state and you hit a tiny milestone, or even just tell yourself, I'm on the right path, your brain releases a little bit of dopamine that says, keep going, override the quit signal. Okay, so let's put it all together. Here's the 3-step process. Step 1, intense focus brings in the acetylcholine spotlight and the norepinephrine engine to mark the circuits for change. Step 2, you push through that friction using small drips of dopamine as fuel. And then step 3, and please do not miss this part, you rest, you do nothing. The actual physical rewiring happens when you're in deep rest and sleep. You trigger the change with effort, but it's consolidated in stillness. And that brings us from the chemistry to the physics, from understanding the system to actually controlling it. If all that chemistry is the code, then your behavior, your actions, that's the keyboard. This is how you actually type in the commands. And this quote from Huberman might be the single most important thing you hear today. You don't think your way into a new mindset, you have to act your way into it. Your thoughts, your feelings, they're complicated, they're messy, but behavior is concrete. It is the control panel for everything else.
And what's so cool about this is that the willpower muscle, it's not just some cute metaphor. It's a real physical part of your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. It's basically your brain's grit center. And the best part? Just like a muscle, the more you use it, the bigger and stronger it gets.
So this gives us an actual protocol, a step-by-step way to build that willpower. First, you voluntarily do something you really don't want to do. That fires up that grit center, the AMSC. You keep doing this and that brain structure literally grows, increasing your capacity for willpower. And here's the magic trick. Your brain actually starts to reward you with dopamine for the effort itself, not for finishing the task.
Think about what's happening here. You are fundamentally hijacking your own reward system. Instead of wiring your brain to seek comfort, you're training it to seek out challenges. You're teaching it that the real reward isn't avoiding the pain, but the very act of moving through it. You're literally building grit from the neurons up. Okay, and this is where it all clicks into place. Because when you do this over and over, you're not just building skills or willpower, you're building an entirely new identity. You're not just changing habits anymore, you are becoming the architect of a new self.
You know, Mel Robbins said it so well. There's a part of your brain that's just an observer, and it doesn't care about your goals, your dreams, or your New Year's resolutions. It builds who you think you are based on one thing and one thing only, the cold, hard evidence of what you do every day. You can't just tell your brain you're a disciplined person, you have to show it.
And this timeline, this shows you the whole journey. Look, on day 1, it's a forced action. It feels awful, right? High friction. By week 1, though, a new pattern starts to form. By month 1, it's becoming a habit. The friction is way lower, but you keep going. And by year 1, it's not something you do anymore. It's just who you are.
And that is the final upgrade. Your new actions are automatic. Your brain's internal story about who you are has been completely rewritten, based on undeniable evidence. Willpower isn't something you have to summon up anymore. It's just your default setting. You're no longer a prisoner of the system. You are the one at the controls.
So look, what we've just gone through, it's not a list of tips and tricks. This is one integrated system. From understanding the prison of your default mind, to learning the chemistry of change, to using the control panel of your actions, all the way to architecting a new identity. It is one single, complete blueprint.
You have the blueprint. You understand the tools, the materials, and the science required to re-engineer the most complex machine in the known universe. The only question left is, what are you going to build?